Good morning and welcome to Mosaic. I'm Rabbi Eric Weiss and honored to be your host this morning. At the core of human existence is language. Communication matters. In a world of ever-expanding technology, how we write, how we read, how we understand the written word, how we understand communication matters. With us this morning to talk about this issue in honor of November as Jewish Book Month is Howard Freedman, who is the director of the Jewish Community Library, and Michael Lavigne, a novelist, most recently publishing The Wanting. Welcome, Michael and Howard.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Howard, let's just jump in. The Jewish Community Library is a library that houses books and has all sorts of different programs that encourage people to read, to enjoy the imagination of writing and the relationship between reader and a book and a writer. How do you see this issue in a world of ever-deepening technology?
It's a good question. Your first words sort of touched me. There's a book that came out last year by the Israeli novelist Amos Oz and his daughter Fanya called Jews and Words. And they have a memorable sentence that's about Jews, that ours is not a bloodline, but a text line. And they sort of locate at the center of the Jewish experience the passing on of the word, of text. And so we see ourselves at the library very much in that tradition. And I see basically that encounter, whether it's through a written book or whether online or whether, or through an ebook, what we're doing fundamentally is interacting with text, very much in that tradition within Judaism of reading the Torah, in synagogue, of sitting around the Seder table at Passover with a book in our hands. And for me, reading a novel is actually a continuation of that experience. When you talk about, one of the things for me that deepens that experience is not only reading, but communicating with each other about it. And that's one of the reasons that I'm a big booster of book clubs. And at the library, we really try to encourage participation in book groups. And
how do you construct a book club at the library?
Well, we have an ongoing drop-in book club, but what's wonderful is that for the most part, we don't have to create much. There are so many informal book groups, or whether affiliated with an institution or just groups of people who know each other, that exist. And our job, we feel, is really to support those groups. We have a program called Book Club in a Box, in which we offer free sets of books to those groups to borrow. And also we have a new program called One Bay, One Book, in which we are encouraging all of the book groups in the Bay Area, should they be interested in exploring a single book this year.
And so, Michael, as an artist, as a writer, as a novelist, just to sort of ask a big, basic question, why do we write? Why write?
Why do we write?
Why do we read? What is
Why
that?
do we write?
Yeah.
That is a big question. I mean, I've grown up, of course, with words, as have you. I mean, it was always in my home. Books were always there. I just can't even imagine life without reading. And of course, it's just a form of self-expression, obviously. You know, for writers, it's a funny thing because, everybody wants to express themselves. But actually, writing a book is a huge job. It's a job of discipline. You have to sit down every day, and you have to work every day as if you were going to the office. And yet, there is something so fundamentally real and pure about what you're doing. You're bringing something out of yourself. And you also bring to bear everything you've ever read, everything you've ever learned, everything you've ever done, actually, into every sentence that you write. It's an extremely powerful thing. And you were talking about book clubs, and I do a lot of book clubs, actually. I like doing them. I Skype them. I had to have do them all over the country. And actually, I'm a one book for Pennsylvania, for Philadelphia. There's about 10,000 people who are going to be reading my book at the same time. And to me, that's mind-boggling. I mean, what more could you want as a writer?
So your book is called The Wanting.
Yeah.
And it's just recently been published. What shall you say that will leave us unsatisfied to the point of wanting to go out and get the book?
What, you mean you want to know what it's about?
Yeah.
I'll just do the opening for you.
Yes,
How's that?
sure.
So this is how it starts. There is a Russian emigre living in Israel. He's an architect. His name is Roman Gutman, and he's sitting in his office in front of his big plate glass window that he loves, someplace in Israel, and a bomb explodes outside of his office, shattering the glass. The glass is about to fall upon him and kill him. Just then, the head of the bomber goes floating across the window. He flinches just enough to be saved from the falling glass. So the person, he's saved actually by the person whose intent it is to kill him. And so what happens is his window, it's not only his window that shatters, but his whole life. And he starts remembering his life in Moscow, and we are able to see that. And also he goes on a journey into the West Bank to find the parents of the person who blew himself up for some sort of closure. And at the same time, it's the story of this young man who blew himself up, who is now sort of this disembodied presence trying to figure out why he can't get into paradise.
Wow. So
And that's only part of it.
we're going to take a quick break just in time for folks to go to their computer and order the book.
Oh, I hope so.
And come back here to join us here on Mosaic in just one moment. Good morning and welcome back to Mosaic. I'm Rabbi Eric Weiss and honored to be your host. We're in the middle of a wonderful conversation about communication, about language, about books in honor of November as Jewish Book Month. We're joined by Michael Lavigne, who is a novelist of a book that's recently been published called The Wanting, and Howard Freedman, who's the director of the Jewish Community Library. Welcome back, Michael and Howard. We were talking earlier, Howard, about book clubs and the nature of them, and I'm wondering how you think about the relationship between a reader and a book as someone who lives among the stacks of books and you have people coming in all the time to get books to read, to enjoy.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, at one level, it's a very intimate experience. I think for those of us who read a lot, there's this relationship that's very sort of a personal relationship of the reader and the book. And then you mentioned book clubs, and it's very much the opposite, where it's a communal experience. And I increasingly really value that communal experience. There's a tradition within Judaism of actually studying our texts in partnership with others. There's a line from the book of Proverbs that says, "As iron sharpens iron, so does one person sharpen another." And there's really a quality when we look at a text together and come to a different perspective. I think, Michael's book is a really good example. I love this book, but I read it myself. If you read it yourself and I read it myself, we would each come to our own perspective. If we then discussed it afterwards, I would be looking through your eyes, and I would be coming probably to some conclusions that I wouldn't have arrived at myself.
I agree with that. In fact, I did a book group on this particular book, on The Wanting, which is my second book. And what I did was I decided I would teach the book as if I hadn't written it. And so I just started asking questions about, like you would in a class. Well, what themes do you see in the book? And I learned an enormous amount about my own work. It was astounding what different people bring to the table when once you write a book, it's out there. You have no control over it at all. And it's enriching, I think, to do these things together without denigrating the idea of this singular experience that you have, sitting in bed. My wife, Gail, was reading Jhumpa Laurie's new book, and she was in bed. She was crying through the entire book.
What's the name of the book?
I can't remember the name. Do you remember it? So I'm going to get it. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah.
But that experience that she had is one kind of wonderful experience. Now when she does that book in her book group, it'll be a completely different thing.
And Michael, as a writer, I know there's so many things that any artist thinks of in their own personal process for the execution of their craft. But I'm wondering, do you yourself as a writer think of the reader while you're writing? Do you have some assumptions about the reader while you're writing, or does that not enter into your particular
great question, actually,
creative process?
Because you do, once you have an audience, they're there and you are thinking about them. You're thinking, will they understand this or will they not understand this? But there's something else at play, is that you have to decide at some point as a writer to trust your audience and not talk down to them, but allow them into your experience as a writer. So it's a balancing act. You want everyone to follow what you're doing, but at the same time you want to be able to challenge them with what you're doing. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious to know, we believe it or not, we have to end in just a moment, but in your own writing style, do you write as if you are speaking and telling a story orally, or is it more of an intellectual, cognitive experience of how you construct a sentence and choose words on a piece of paper, that sort of thing?
Yeah, it's both, actually.
It's both.
You know, for me, when I'm writing, I am completely involved in my characters. I am them. And I actually see what's happened. I see it, visually see it, hear it in like the millisecond before I'm typing it. So it's like a play for me. Before it's on the page, it's in my mind.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So we're going to encourage people to engage with book clubs and otherwise come to the Jewish Community Library.
I just want to plug the library. It's just a great, great place.
And we're also going to encourage folks to look for your book, The Wanting, from Michael Lavigne. Believe it or not, we need to take another break. We're going to say goodbye to Howard and Michael and welcome two other authors in just one moment here on Mosaic. Good morning and welcome back to Mosaic. We're in the middle of a wonderful conversation in honor of November as Jewish Book Month about writing and reading and the nature of communication in today's world. I want to let you know that the Jewish Community Library's book club this year is called One Bay, One Book. That's the name of the program for the year. And the book that they are going to be reading and discussing for the entire year is a book called A Guide for the Perplexed by Dara Horn. A Guide for the Perplexed by Dara Horn, and is part of the One Bay, One Book Club with the Jewish Community Library here in San Francisco.